Hi guys, so today I'll be doing a video on Springleaf Residences, and this is possibly the launch of this year. In today's video, I'll be covering on how Springleaf Residences will actually be compared to the other launches along the TEL line. Based on the information I have, I'm quite sure we'll be able to make some comparisons along this line, and also you'll have some valuable takeaways by the end of this video. Do stay tuned. Alright, so for Springleaf Residence, we are expecting it to start preview on the 1st of August. So for those of you that's interested in this development, or you also like me to help you do an analysis for you, right? You can feel free to reach out to me at WhatsApp 84849302, or you can scan the QR code to WhatsApp me as well. Looking forward to hear from you guys. For those of you that's not familiar with the Upper Thomson area, this plot will be this one over here. So we are very short walk towards Springleaf MRT. And you can see majority of this area actually is unpopulated. It is surrounded by greenery. And later on, I will show you the master plan of this area, how it actually looks like. And then in the vicinity, there will be a couple of shops as well as a landed cluster. Opposite here, we have the SLE. So for those of you looking at Springleaf Residences, you kind of need to know the facing and the surroundings of this area. Okay, so this is how it looks like on the Google Maps itself. So you can really see it's all surrounded by greenery, this area. And if you zoom in, right, actually this one is a old secondary school. They're going to be conserving part of the secondary school. So later on, I also will be covering, right, on which part they are going to be conserving and how I potentially can see the entire set plan will play out for this particular plot. So for those of you who have been following for a while on the GLS, this parcel is also known as Upper Thomson Parcel B. Guaco Land is the only sole bidder for this Upper Thomson Road GLS at 905 PSF PPR. Then now talking about the neighboring parcel, right, which is Upper Thomson Road Parcel A. So this one we saw on the previous bidding, there was no bids at the URA tender. I think this was quite evident in the developers' response in this area. I think the developers, they saw that because this was a service apartment site, they were not confident of service apartments in this suburban area. And then it's untested and not in the key commercial area as well. The rental demand might not be supported by expats or other tenants. In this area, it is typically not associated with mid-term tenants. So that's why I think the developers, even though the site is right beside MRT, they were not willing to open any bids. And developers also need to consider if they were to open up a service apartment, right, they need to compete with the individual private landlords in the landed nearby and also the new plot, which is Springleaf Residence right beside it. So of course, this was all happening before June 19, 2024 because the bid was last year. Over here, we can clearly see, right, the government's direction for the TEL line. Despite having no bidders last year at June 2024, government actually took some feedback. And right now, this parcel A, it is rezoned with a commercial at the first story and will be slated to launch in June 2025 this year. So stay tuned for that. So you can see, right, it will be rezoned, commercial at first story, site area about 2.44 hectares, 2.2 plot ratio, estimated housing units about 500 plus, close to 600. Commercial space almost 2,000 square meters. And then we'll be looking to launch at June 2025. So that's why when we look at what is happening at Springleaf Residence, right, it does offer something unique because from the previous bid, right, when they bidded for Parcel B, the situation at Parcel A was unknown. But right now, after you know like what's going to happen at Parcel A, which is a mixed development, you can see that actually for Springleaf, yes, in this area might not be a lot of amenities or that. You just need to wait maybe one more year after this Parcel A at Upper Thomson Road is launched. So the development, maybe the TOP time, maybe 1 year later, then you did experience some of the commercial shops and spaces that is right beside your plot. For this Springleaf site, you can see actually the Guaco Land, they actually managed to get a green facility loan of 847 million to develop this Upper Thomson site. So in this press conference, right, we can see more details reviewed about this development. You can see this project will actually feature a 525-story towers. So means this is consisting of 5 buildings. On top of that, there will be a conserved portion of the former Seletar Institute. So this one was originally constructed as Upper Thomson Secondary School. Here you can see, right, Guaco Land, they always do the developments or they bid for it, right? They always do it in a very strategic manner. They wanted to uplift the entire Springleaf neighborhood. This is going to be quite similar, right, to what we see at Lentor Mansion, because they also managed to get this green loan for the Lentor Mansion because it has this conserved portion. Later on, I'll be covering a little bit on the site plan for you to see how I actually envision Guaco Land can build up this Springleaf residence plot. Okay, so right now, let's take a look at the master plan and the Springleaf MRT area. We are talking about this plot, which is the Springleaf Residence, and then you can see right beside it. So this will be the mixed development coming up in this June for bidding. So expected launch for this development, if it goes through, very likely it will be Q3, Q4 of 2026. In this area, you can see actually there's not much amenities and there's really no schools nearby. Okay, so do bear in mind if you are intending for a school, maybe in the Lentor area, it might suit your family needs more rather than the Springleaf area. In this area, right, mainly now we have quite a bit of landed. Just to take a look at Springleaf Avenue side, right, you can see this is a 3-story mixed landed. Over here at the Springleaf Avenue, Springleaf Road side, we have the 3-story semi-detached. So it means that all the landed here, right, they're all semi-Ds. They don't have any terrace over here. On the top side, we have the Springside Avenue, which also has a 3-story mixed landed. On the left side, along Mandai Road here, we also have the 3-story mixed landed. In this area, right, generally, if you're looking at for unblocked views, very likely for this plot, right, it will be towards the SLE side or it will be towards the landed side. Very likely the developer will play around for the blocks, because now we know there's a total of 5 blocks. They'll play between these two areas. So one good thing about this particular development is that there is not really new resale condo nearby. So I would say there's really not much competition in this area. And if there's any competition, there are really not new condominiums and the development is not that near MRT also. And on top of that, the thing I like is that they have this subject to detail planning, right? So very likely they could introduce HDB in this area or even they introduce other new launches, etc. So I would think this area is going to be quite interesting to see how the government intends to develop this whole area. But as of right now, they are slowly releasing the land and carving it out, right, to develop the area slowly and not suddenly like flood the area with a lot of residents. Okay, so right now I'll be covering on the recent launches along the Thomson East Coast Line, and all these examples are after the GFA harmonization, so the PSF will be quite relevant over here. So first up, right, we have Woodlands South MRT area, which is Norwood Grand. So Norwood Grand, right, you can see the PSF range is between 1008 to 2002 range. So this kind of provides like a safety or entry price, I would say, towards Springleaf residences. If anything below Norwood Grand then, or even close to Norwood Grand, I would say it's quite a no-brainer to buy based on the different bedroom sizes. So next up, we have Springleaf MRT over here. So this one, Springleaf Residences at 905 PSF PPR. Next up, we have Lentor MRT area. We have Lentor Mansion between 2001 to 2003 PSF. Here we have Lentor Central Residences. So this one is at 982 PSF PPR between 1009 range to 2500 range. So for you guys, I'm not sure you can see, actually there is a slight increase already between Lentor Mansion to Lentor Central, because I think Lentor Mansion they launched about 1 year plus earlier compared to Lentor Central. Do take note, Lentor Central don't have between 1 km of CHIJ. So even here, even without the 1 km to CHIJ, Lentor Central was already able to command a higher PSF as compared to Lentor Mansion itself. But of course, I'm taking the recent transactions at Lentor Mansion. I never go and take into account the launch day pricing. Yeah, because I think the launch day one is a bit old news already because that is almost 1+ year ago. So I don't think it's going to be that relevant. So now that we know the prices at Norwood Grand and also Lentor Central, right, it kind of forms the safety net and also the price ceiling of what I would recommend for my clients. Norwood Grand will kind of provide the safety net as to what prices to enter at Springleaf. But at the same time for Lentor Central, right, it kind of creates the ceiling already for what I recommend for clients that's entering Springleaf Residence. Because when you already see this PSF transacted at Lentor Central, you must remember that actually in the Lentor area, the amenities is slightly better and is closer to certain primary schools like CHIJ or Anderson Primary. So do take note that Springleaf Residence is more similar towards the Norwood Grand side. But in terms of the height of the building, right, Lentor Central will be more similar towards Springleaf because they are both on the higher rise side. Okay, so right now I'm going to compare between these 4 plots in terms of the site. So I think this is going to be quite interesting because for Springleaf Residences, right, this is a 344,000 square feet land, and this one will be 940 units. It has 5 towers and 25 stories. So this is considered a high-rise development already. Density per unit, right, we're looking at about 366 square feet per unit. And then next up at Woodlands South area, we have Norwood Grand. So this is a much smaller plot, almost half of this at 155,000 square feet. And this is 348 units. So you already can see the stark difference, right? Even though this is about half the size of Springleaf Residence, the land, right? But the number of units is almost 1/3. And over here, we have 4 towers of 11 story. So the density here, right, you're looking at about 446 square feet per unit. And if you even compare the number of towers on the same plot of land, definitely Norwood Grand is going to be a lot more cramped as compared to Springleaf Residences. So next up, we have Lentor Central. So Lentor Central, in terms of size, right, is very similar to Norwood Grand. But the main thing about Lentor Central, which makes it more attractive, I would say, is the number of towers. 158,000 square feet of land, 477 units. So I would say in terms of Lentor Central and Norwood Grand, the land size is kind of similar, but for Lentor Central, it only has 2 towers. So this really gives the developer, right, a lot more space to play around with the site facilities and how they want to plan the overall piece of land. Here is a high-rise development, 27 and 28 stories, and the density per unit will be 331 square feet. You don't feel as cramped in the development itself. And last but not least, we have Lentor Mansion. So Lentor Mansion, the land size is definitely the biggest in the Lentor area, 235,000 square feet. But the main thing is that because it has a lot of towers, so for 533 units, when you see on paper, right, it does feel like the number of units on that huge piece of land is very attractive. When you look closely at how they plan the site itself, because it is a lower rise development, they have a mix of 8 stories and 16 stories in this development. But the main thing is that they have 6 towers. So this one is really the main key point that makes Lentor Mansion, I feel, overall more cramped, because even though the density here is at 441 square feet per unit, actually it does feel like even more cramped than Norwood Grand itself. But overall, because they have the staggering effect of like a mid-floor and then they have a 16-floor story towers, right, the facade, all this doesn't feel that cramped overall. So maybe you guys can let me know in the comment section whether you agree with my analysis, because so far out of the 4 plots, right, I really do see Springleaf Residences being quite attractive in terms of the spacing between each tower. That's why you can see, right, on a 300,000+ square feet land, you only have 5 towers and they are all high rise up to 25 story. I've compiled the 4 different site plan. Okay, so you can see this is Lentor Mansion 1. Actually, you can see, right, for this overall piece of development, even though it's at 200,000+ square feet, right, actually the blocks don't really have that much spacing between each blocks. And on top of that, they only have like 1 and 2 water feature. Other than that, most of the development is not really reserved for the facilities. Like you have this open area and maybe the tennis court over here, but that's it. You can see for Norwood's grand site plan, also very similar. Here 1, 2, 3, 4 towers, and then they are still able to squeeze in a tennis court and a swimming pool. And of course the drop-off area and the underground car park. When you compare between Norwood Grand and Lentor Mansion, it does feel like it's similar in this sense in terms of the spacing of the development. Like there's really not much space to play around. Okay, so now we take a look at Lentor Central site plan. You see, right, here there's Tower 1 and then there's Tower 2. So because there's only 2 towers on this similar plot of land, similar in terms of the size between Lentor Central and Norwood Grand, right, you can see the developer actually has a lot more room to play with the facilities. So you can see there is 1, 2, 3 and 4 water features, and also they still have this open air gym area, and then this will be the clubhouse and tennis court, and also the underground car park. And I would say for Guaco Land and Hong Leong, CDL, they are all very reputable developers in Singapore. So definitely they know what kind of amenities and things that buyers are looking out for, especially in Singapore's market. So for all these experienced developers, this is the best that they can come up with for Norwood Grand as compared to Lentor Central. The key main difference here, right, really is the number of towers that's built. Alright, so last but not least, I only have the master plan for this Springleaf residence, but we can kind of dissect what's going on over here based on how Guacolan actually planned for Lentor Mansion. So you can see, right, actually here is the T junction for this Springleaf Road area. If you can see just now, right, when I show you the school, the road, right, is something like this. So when the road goes towards this conservation part of the development, right, very likely, I think the developer, they will also still keep the pathway here and make this into like a drop-off area / clubhouse. So why I say this, because this is actually what happened for Lentor Mansion. So you can see the drive-through, right, is over here, and then the drop-off area is combined with the conservation house. Very likely the developer, since they are the same one, Guacolan, they'll be doing a similar concept. So they won't be doing an additional clubhouse. They'll be using the old school as part of the clubhouse already, and possibly the drop-off point. Okay, so over here, I have the live snapshot of Springleaf Residence area and also the master plan right beside it. So this one can kind of give you a better gauge, right, on what to expect on the site plan itself. Maybe I just try to draw out a little bit. Yeah, so this is the overall shape, right, when we look at the master plan versus the actual site area. And you can see over here, we have this conservation part of the school. So this is the block 821 over here. And judging from the picture, I think they are gonna keep part of the road. So if they're gonna keep the part of the road here, right, very likely it's gonna be similar to what we see at Lentor Mansion already. Because Lentor Mansion over there, they also have a similar concept in terms of the conservation portion, and then they will do it as a clubhouse and then a drop-off point. Now, right, it's the interesting part as to how the developers will actually plan the 5 towers. So I think there's going to be a few ways the developer can play around these views. So the first one, right, very likely the developer will leverage on the unblocked views for the landed side, because this one, even though the master plan over here is zoned as residential, for the blocks facing this side, right, they will be unblocked for years to come. And they could be like 2 blocks like that. 2 blocks, 1 block, and then the second block like that. So this is a potential kind of orientation they might adopt. I'm not completely sure. And now for the other 3 blocks, very likely I think they are going to be doing it something like that. And maybe 1 more block here. So this is overall what I can envision here, because here, right, very likely they're going to be selling towards the unblocked view for the Nisun Camp, the Macquarie Reservoir, that side. But of course, you're going to be facing towards the SLE side. So I think this is quite similar to what you get at East Coast Park. So for East Coast, the views, you're going to get like the unblocked sea view, but of course you need to tahan the expressway noise. Most likely they're going to have the facilities over here. So I think this is how they're going to plan the orientation. Because if you look at the master plan itself, right, actually after you factor in this conservation part, right, the remaining plots are like you see over here. I'm not completely sure if they can even do another block there, because if they're gonna build the drive-through at the top part here, I don't think they can build a block there. So very likely it will be like 1 block, 2 block, maybe 3, 4, 5, and they will space out between these 3 blocks to have unblocked views of each other. So they're gonna stagger out lah. I got a feeling here, right, they're going to be selling premium based on the unblocked views of the landed side. And then here you also have the unblocked views, but you need to take into account this pink plot over here, which is the parcel A lah. If this plot ratio is 2.5, the plot ratio for that one and the building height is not going to be that far off from what we see at Springleaf Residence. So now I'm going to be touching a little bit more on the master plan, right, with regards to the Lentor and Springleaf area. So this is the Springleaf side, and then this is the Lentor side. In between, right, actually we have one more MRT, which is Tagore MRT. It's already there, it's just that it's not open yet. You can see the government's direction, right. These 2 plots are major plots, right, is empty forested greenery. So right now the government, they're slowly injecting all these new launches in this area for the developers to set up the shops and all that. Then once all this is already done, right, the government, I think very high chance they're going to be launching HDBs around here. I won't be surprised, because if not, right, I really don't see so many condos flooding this area lah. Definitely you need to have a balance between the HDB and condo. If not, this area, right, if it's all going to be condo, it's going to feel like Tanah Merah MRT that side. Because you see Tanah Merah MRT, right, because all the area, right, is surrounded by condos. As a result, when I go there that time, right, it feels like a very gated community area because this Tanah Merah area is surrounded by all condominiums. Then when you want to cut past certain areas to reach the MRT, right, it's impossible one because they're all gated. And you want to get to the MRT is so inconvenient. So that's why I think the developers and the government very likely they will plan this area to have a mix of HDB as well. If not, this area surrounding the MRTs is all gonna be condominiums, right? I don't think it's gonna be that community friendly lah, especially if they're trying to build up this area from ground up. Okay, so next up is going to be more on a technical analysis, right, for the Lentor area itself. So here you can see all the previous land bids and also when the project launched. And you can see how many units were sold lah. And this data is up to March 2025. We just look at the more recent ones. Lentor Mansion, 985 PSF PPR, number of units sold was 94% during March that time. Harmonized plot, Lentor Central, 982 PSF PPR, and this is 1 year later from Lentor Mansion, 477 units, and also very strong sales, 95% sold. Right now, we have an upcoming Lentor Gardens, which tender closed on the 3rd of April. So if you see from the trend, right, very likely we are looking at Q2 or Q3 of 2026 for Lentor Gardens to be launched. And this is estimated of 500 plus units. And you can see based on the take-up rate, right, now we have about 93+% sold already. This data was on March. So definitely now at June, this number will have gone up already. So the buyers in this area already can accept the Lentor. So I do expect for this Lentor Gardens plot also should have a very strong take-up rate depending on the pricing. Okay, so right now we're going to be looking at the Thomson East Coast Line past 1 year transactions. I never take some of the prices from the launch day, but this is just more of the past 12 months. So for Norwood Grand, right, 1008 to 2002 PSF, Lentoria, 1009 to 2005, Hillock Green, 1008 to 2005, Lentor Mansion, 21 to 23, Lentor Hill, 1009 to 2004, Lentor Modern, 21 to 24, Almo Residences, 22 to 23. So when you already have all the prices along this line, right, Norwood Grand is 1 MRT away. Lentor is also 1 MRT away. Even though they have slightly different characteristics for the area itself, I would say this is quite important in terms of pricing. And just take note more on the harmonized one because all the non-harmonized plot, right, the PSF is a bit different in terms of calculation. For their launches is quite long ago already, so I don't think they are as relevant today. So this will kind of form the analysis and pricing here. And of course, I would say Almo Residences is going to TOP this year or next year lah. So I would say the pricing at the sub-sale transactions there is also quite important. So one more thing to take note, if you are entering Springleaf Residences in the coming August, right, you need to know for the developer Kingsford that they bidded the Lentor Gardens at 920 PSF PPR, right, I really think it's very close to what we see at Springleaf there. It really depends on the developer's positioning. I don't see a need, right, for the Kingsford to launch Lentor Gardens cheap, even though they bought the land cheap. The take-up rate at Lentor is very strong. So as a result, the supply is very low already. If Kingsford already see Lentor Central performing so well on launch day itself at this pricing, what makes you think that they will launch at the same price? If they launch slightly higher than this 1009 to 2005 range, very likely I think this Lentor Gardens will still do very well. Do bear in mind this one is 2005 PSF, this is not 2008. I'm not surprised if Kingsford actually will launch higher than Lentor Central and still getting very strong results based on the launch day sales. But that being said, if we actually take notice on the Kingsford current Singapore stock, right, actually they have Bloomsbury and they got another one at Media Circle. So they have this current stock, right, at the Media Circle area. They might just want this Lentor Gardens to move fast. And also they have a bit left at Chuan Park. Yeah, so all these things you need to take note on how aggressive the developer can be. So when we know, right, for Kingsford, on top of that, they still got OMG also. So when we know they have these 4 developments, right, that still have remaining stock. And to be honest, the number of units sold is not like close to Lentor Central kind of take-up rate on the launch day, then I would think maybe they cannot be so aggressive for Lentor Gardens. But then again, if they pull a similar thing like what happened for Trump Park, then I'm not surprised. Maybe they increase price a couple of times in the same day, because this is what happened for Trump Park itself. That's why I told my buyer to walk away from the Trump Park one. You can watch the video, but regardless for Lentor Gardens, right, the developer is kind of stuck in a tough spot, because on one hand, they did see Lentor Central selling very well at this PSF between 19 to 25. But can they actually price it same or even more aggressive, seeing that Lentor has no more supply? And actually, if you watch my OCR new launch videos, right, you kind of can see for the rest of 2025, there isn't much exciting launches coming up as compared to maybe the Springleaf Residence. And on top of that, for 2026, I think other than the Tampines plot, the rest of the developments probably won't be as exciting. So for those near MRT one, this 920 PSF PPR is going to be one of the more cheaper ones. But depending on Kingsport, maybe they have the ground floor unit is the starting price. Then after that, above they just like jump 100k, 50k, that kind of thing. Because that's what we saw at Trump Park. It really depends on how many checks they receive for Lentor Gardens and how greedy the developers are. So with that in mind, right, I hope you guys kind of have a sensing of how I actually advise my clients on what is a safe entry price and what is a walkaway price, right, for Springleaf Residences. Because actually all the numbers and data is all over here along the TEL line. It's just that you have to go and dissect it according to the different bedroom types and also the layouts and the facing to see whether the unit type you're getting at Springleaf Residence is worth considering. Because I'm quite sure this 60 PSF gap in terms of the land, right, will make a very big difference in terms of your profit margin and entry price for Springleaf Residence. For those of you that maybe need advice with regards to this and how much I can estimate for the Lentor Gardens plot to be selling next year, feel free to hit me up. You can WhatsApp me at 8484-9302. As I said earlier in the video, this will be the launch of the year. I do foresee a lot of FOMO, a lot of hype surrounding this project. So I do hope you guys find this information useful for yourself and also kind of have a walkaway price and entry price. And I hope we don't really see much bounce out unit for Springleaf Residence, because even at Lentor Central, even though it was 90+% sold on day one, there was quite a few units that was bounced out in the end. I really hope my viewers, they don't lose money and then they FOMO, after that they regret. I sincerely hope that you guys know what you're doing and then don't succumb to the FOMO and the hype. Alright? Okay, so right now, let's take a look at the resale, right, for the recently TOP projects in the OCR region. Then we kind of compare what kind of entry price is also safe based on the resale prices. So my search criteria, right, will be within 500 meters towards MRT and also on the bigger developments, so minimum 300 units and above, and TOP between 2023 to 2025. Based on my search, we have narrowed down to 5 projects. For these 5 projects for OCR within 500 meters, right, for MRT, you can cross out Treasure at Tampines, because even though this is within 500 meters radius to Simei MRT, you need to cross the expressway. So I don't think this is a fair comparison because I wouldn't say this is walking distance of 500 meters. So the first up, we have Sengkang Grand Residences, a mixed development with Sengkang Grand Mall and Bangkok MRT. Past transactions are already averaging about 2000 PSF range. Then now we look at the Water Gardens at Canberra. So this one, for transactions, we're also looking at between 1007 to 1008 range already. Midwood, so this is at the Hillview area. So this one also transacting at about 1009 PSF range. This one will be right beside the Hillview Community Centre and a little bit of a walking distance towards Hillview MRT, but it's still within 500 meters. Last but not least, we have Pasir Ris 8. So this one also is a mixed development at Pasir Ris MRT area. We have 12 past transactions and already between 1006 to 2001 PSF transacted, average about 1009 to 2000 PSF. If you see just based on the past trends, right, of course some of them, the area is a little bit more developed or they are mixed development, but this kind of gives confidence to buyers, right, going into new launches in the OCR area, especially if they are close to the resale pricing. Because right now, you can see why Lentor Central Residences actually sold out so well, because a lot of the resale prices, right, it's actually very close to what we see at the new launches. Does this make sense if you can wait for the TOP construction or this? This are really up to individual. I know some families, they cannot wait so long, so they are looking at alternatives, maybe the post-launch instead of the new launch. because the post-launch is actually almost same price as a resale that's newly TOP. So right now, we do see a trend, right, of buyers choosing between the OCR new launches versus the resale developments in the OCR, because the OCR developments really, they are not that cheap anymore. Okay, so now I'll be covering a little bit more about 2025 launches and how I came to the conclusion, right, of why Springleaf Residences could be the launch of the year. So for 2025, I'm going to be taking reference towards Lentor Central in terms of how I calculate the PSF on launch. For Upper Thomson Road Parcel B, right, Springleaf Residence, at Springleaf MRT 905 PSF PPR, I estimate the PSF launch to be 2027. So if they really launch at this pricing, I think it's going to be very attractive. And we should expect same kind of sales compared to Lentor Central. Second one, so very likely Canberra Crescent will be launching end of this year. So this one will be walking distance towards Canberra MRT, 793 PSF PPR, and estimate PSF, right, is between 1007 to 1008 range. For this one, right, I'll be doing a video later on. I'll be comparing this Canberra Crescent plot, right, to the Water Gardens at Canberra. Next up, we have Tampines Street 94. So this one is a mixed D, PSF PPR 1004. So I estimate the launch pricing to be around 2002 range. I think it's gonna be very hot along with Springleaf Residence, because between these two, I know Tampines, even though this is not as big as Springleaf Residence, Tampines area, the demand has been very, very strong all along. And we can see that even at the integrated development of Parktown Residence. And Parktown Residence, the PSF also not cheap. Last but not least, we have Faber Walk. So for this one, right, I think it's going to be quite interesting because this area already has proven track record from Twinview, Park Rivera, and Whistler Grand. But as of right now, looking at the PSF, this is not near MRT, even though it's at the West Coast area, it's not near MRT. 900 PSF PPR, and the launch price estimating should be around 2000 PSF range. Judging by this, right, for Singaporeans, yes, I mean, West Coast is a completely different area, but I think the MRT component is quite important. And if Upper Thomson to Springleaf MRT versus this Faber Walk one, right, they are launching almost same PSF. I think more Singaporeans will still go for the Upper Thomson Road, even though it's less developed as compared to the Faber Walk area. Faber Walk area, for now, is not going to be near MRT, but once the Jurong Regional Line is up, then it will be nearer towards the MRT station, but as of now, it is not. In conclusion, you can kind of see for this year, OCR new launch range is going to be between 1007 all the way up to 2000 plus range. Now I'll cover a little bit about the 2026 launches. So this one is also for the OCR region. Tengah Garden, Hong Kong MRT, estimate about 1008 PSF. Dairy Farm 2002. The shocking ones, I'll be touching on this. You see Bayshore 3001 PSF is using the same formula. Of course, the developer can launch lower. I won't be 100% sure, but I'm just using an estimate. So Lentor Gardens, maybe about 2000 PSF. So other than the Bayshore, that one was shocking. The Lakeside Drive one was also quite shocking for me. Because, okay, so for this area, right, CDL actually bidded at 1132 PSF PPR. Based on the same formula, we should be expecting Lakeside, right, to be around $2,500 per square feet. This is really a new benchmark in the Lakeside area. Yes, beside Lakeside MRT, beside Jurong Lake Gardens, and also Rulang Primary School. But in the end, right, for this Lakeside area at 2005, that's why I've been telling some of my clients to look at the resale condos along Lakeside area for the longest time. So because I foresee this plot is quite popular amongst developers, and I kind of can gauge the pricing, but 2005 PSF launch, right, was definitely not on my cards. I was expecting closer towards the PSF range of like Sora and Lake Gardens. Those are, even though they're nearer to the park, they are not within 1 km of the Rulang and the MRT. They are quite far away. So I was not expecting this price range for Lakeside. But if you see, right, for next year, you got one more plot, Chancharu Close, not closed yet, the land, so we don't know what was the overall result. Still open. 2 more Chuan Grove plots for tender, and then there's also a Hougang mixed use. You see, right, actually next year, you want to get something slightly below 2000 PSF range, right? It's going to be harder and harder already, because even at Tengah area, you're going to be looking at 1008 PSF. And for Tengah, right, this is historically a place where it's a lot of EC one. You can think about Soul Acres, the Copen Grand, so you'll be competing with a lot of these ECs, and as of right now, the options for below 2000 PSF is not going to be that much anymore. So that's why I very likely will predict Lentor Gardens and Upper Thomson, this Springleaf plot, and also Tampines 394, right, to do very well, because very likely this one is like near MRT and also slightly close to the 2000 PSF range. Alright, so if you like my analysis on this Springleaf Residence plot so far, you can feel free to like and subscribe, and also check out my YouTube channel for the other analysis that I've done for the upcoming launches for 2025 and 2026. Looking forward to hear from you guys if you guys are interested in this Springleaf plot, because this one will be previewing on 1st of August tentatively. And if you like a breakdown on the comparisons or that, feel free to reach out to me. You can scan the QR code or WhatsApp me at 84849302. Looking forward to hear from you guys. Alright, thanks. Bye.